Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Boz, and we are Tuesday night on the advent of our holiday season. We are gathering with a little bit of anticipation for the holiday season, at least at my house. And I am going to talk tonight about some of the obstacles and pitfalls that we have and how I like to hack my way through them, some of the steps that I take, and hoping that you get back on that keto wagon as soon as you fall off. And maybe you'll be better than me and not fall off. So tonight I'm just looking at some of the comments. Glad to see that you can hear me. I love those comments. And we've got some others that, oh yeah, you guys are well trained because this all can't start till you can see and hear me. And that's not a given on my show. I have a little bit of a hoarse voice tonight. But I am setting up for one of the traditions here on the Dr. Boz Channel, and that's to check my numbers. So I've just plugged my strips into my meters, and I am not doing the best on my fast this week. I had just a heck of a day yesterday, and I was maybe loved by my husband a little too much, where he said, "Here, have one of your pickled boiled eggs." Which I honestly loved. So I had a bathtub and a boiled egg. So I have only 24 hours into a fast. So 1.1 and 75 glucose. But I will check that again at the end of the night. I am doing some ketones tonight. Again, we're going to talk all about those ketones and a couple things that I have been looking for, some articles, having some insight into the science and counting down to some of the things that I look forward to each year, which is reviewing some of the new articles that come out in the keto world. So let's do a couple of other things that I like to do. Let's see, on the Dr. Boz channel here, I am going to do not that page, although that's a lovely page. That's my page of my website, where let's see, I want to do, I know what I want to do. I want to do this and this. We're going to do a couple of the reviews because one of them actually came in today. So I like looking at the reviews, and one of the reviews that came in was actually yesterday, December 13th. And it is by David. Again, I'm a self-published author here. That Any Way You Can book has sold over 100,000 copies, which is a blessing. But it only happened because so many people helped me by writing the reviews that were genuine, but you still got to sit there and write them. So here writes David. Very good information. And again, this is the book Any Way You Can, the first book I wrote, with easy to understand explanations. Failures explained with steps to overcome those failures. We're doing that again tonight. This book is very good inspiration for those who want to obtain health benefits found throughout the ketogenic living. Dr. Bosworth explains why so many people have failed the ketogenic diet. It is not a diet. It is a problem in chemistry. I just love that. She teaches how to maximize the chemistry in your body for optimal health and does it in a way that makes it easy to understand and follow. David, thank you. Thank you for the 5 stars, and thank you for taking the time to write that. As we look over at the keto continuum, this, again, not out, we're not at the year mark yet for this, so that's pretty impressive. But last week, this came out right after I did my live, so this book is powerful. I highly recommend it to anyone who is interested in changing their health for the better. This book goes step by step on how to attain ketosis and optimal health. It is also interesting to read about David's journey as he travels the keto road. I love how Dr. Boz makes learning about keto so interesting and easy for a layperson to understand. I also have the workbook, and I'm currently using this with a support group I lead. You rock, Karen. This is a life-changing book. And the picture shows before and after keto. I don't know if you can see that, but isn't she beautiful? That's so nice. So thank you for taking the time to do that. and to then just share your picture. That's, oh, there it is, much better. I blew it up. Oh, look at how cute she is. That's awesome. Good job, Karen. And then finally, I have the last review is the Keto Continuum workbook. And I thought this was really interesting because when looking at your analytics of who follows you, apparently there are several who follow me that are of the engineering and analytical brain. So here's what Jean had to say. Great companion to the main book. I have a more analytical personality, so I like to see the steps in clear format. I think that Dr. Boz's books are both great and enjoy reading them. For my brain, the workbook makes it more actionable. I like to see the clear steps. I first learned about ketogenic diet 3 years ago and ate the way most of the time, except 2020. However, I would always have bouts of craving and didn't understand why. Eventually, I figured out that I wasn't getting enough salt. I was tempted by anything crunchy and salty, like chips, when I came across them. Adding 1/4 tablespoon of salt to a glass of water and a cup of coffee was a game changer. That sounds really weird if you've never put salt in your coffee, and clearly my husband does not drink my coffee because there's salt in it and he thinks that's gross. When I read the Keto Continuum book, I learned that it was more important to make the chemistry change in the beginning by focusing on the fat rather than trying so hard to fit more protein into my diet, like so many were recommending. Now it's much easier and I am far more consistent. I feel like this book and workbook set a more realistic approach to low carb. I'm able to stick to it this way of eating, and now really do have the extra energy, which is the point of keto, and mental clarity that I have been craving. Losing 25 pounds hasn't been so bad either. I recommend the set. So thank you. Those are definitely some of the highlights for me. Is when I prepare for the show, I take time to read all of the reviews that have come in over the past week, and definitely you make my day by sharing those with other people, but hopefully by sharing them with people you love too, meaning sharing the book. So I do want you to type in your questions because the holiday season is a little rough. It is on me. I have teenagers coming home again from college, and I've been loved by food too. So I want to love them with food. But I did that a lot at Thanksgiving, and I've honestly just not been able to shop since then. Like, oh God, we ate enough of that holiday to last us probably till June. So, but I know better. There's some important things coming up over the next 3 weeks, and I will give you some of my insight. So we are going to review a paper tonight. I've been promising this for about 3 weeks. So as I do that, though, I have a team that is looking at the questions that I am really looking for those teachable moments. So if you have a question that that you think you could learn from, but also others could learn from, the team is helping me sort through those so I can get to the ones that would kind of stick to this topic of struggling and how do you get through it. Today, I actually want to share a little bit about something that I just love. Having a little bit of a tough day yesterday, another setback in getting this clinic open. And I feel like I have just a bloody nose and a black eye from all of the obstacles that can happen when there's things going back on in South Dakota that I can't quite tie off the strings before I get them done. And then to try and open things here, it just has been frustrating. So there was one of those days yesterday, and again, my husband greeted me at the door with one of my pickled boiled eggs, and he had already started the tub and said, just go to bed early. So it wasn't fasting, but it was not bad. And today I got to count down to one of my favorite things, which is, it was week 2, really week 1, because last week was kind of orientation for this brains course that I offer. And when you're doing what you're supposed to do, which is, in my case, the obstacles that I have getting things transitioned to Florida, it would be easy to say, forget it, not doing this. But I was in front of, again, an amazing classroom of people that want to learn about something that I love teaching about, which is the brain. And it's almost, the longer the class went on, the more my energy was focused, and I could feel the joy of just doing what you're called to do. So I just want to say again, thank you for the students that have joined me in this class. And I do not, I just can't tell you how rewarding it is to share what it is I've learned with people who are truly hungry, to not be on another prescription, to not have a place where they say, hey, doc, how do I, we're going to talk about some hacking tonight, so I'm not above that. But to be able to step forward in the 20 years of seeing patients and watching plenty of funerals where brains don't work right, it's not an accident that I chirp about ketones every Tuesday night. And then when I watch some people really struggling with their brains and how do they get to the next level, I just can't wait for the clinic to be open so I can see them in person. But until then, the course is very rewarding. So we are going to talk tonight about a paper, again, one that I've been talking about for a little while, saying we're gonna look at this, and I am going to use some of their introduction on how they opened this paper up. Let me find the right tab here. There we go. Yes. Okay, so this is an article that came out last year, and I've kind of had a couple of articles where it talks about how ketones work in cell membranes and how ketones work in our overall body chemistry. And it's a little heavy. I've actually done this a couple times where as you try to explain appetite suppression, you cannot do it with a 30-second, those little shorts on YouTube ain't gonna work. This paper gives a really amazing understanding of how complex this is. So the paper came out in 2020. Excuse me. My throat is just a little scratchy there. Paper came out in 2020, and it is about the impact of ketosis on appetite regulation. And the authors put together this review by really pulling in a lot of the data on what's happening with ketosis. Oopsie, I didn't want to do that. Ketosis, hunger, ghrelin, and exogenous ketones. So I'll just do a couple of little highlights here. They are looking for the burden of obesity and the importance of the practical treatments for weight loss. They go on to be a little bit discouraging that when people go to lose weight, they really do struggle. Let's see, I think it's actually in the first section of the next page where they introduce some of the statistics, which you may not have checked in, but you tune in on Tuesday nights to hear about hopefully some encouragement and maybe a little answers on the ketogenic diet. But I would think you would tune in because you want to see that you're not alone. And if you ever wanted evidence for, this was last year before the pandemic, so I'm a little worried about what the numbers have done in the last year. But to look that more than 1.9 billion adults presenting with overweight and over 650 million with obesity, the major risk factor for the diseases of type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, and certain forms of cancer. As they look at the difference of how patients lost weight, they were a little discouraging. They're like, despite the clinically relevant weight loss of 5 or 10%. And if you've looked around the room or if you've been in a support group and say, I have actually the last time I was counting the number of people that have lost over 100 pounds using the Dr. Boz books or support groups or Neurons page, we were dozens into over 100 pounds that had been lost, and I've never met them. Again, more weight loss than I had ever done inside a clinic. But that 10 or 15% weight loss, that's not what these people are losing. I mean, these folks that are losing 100 pounds, 150 pounds, it's like a third of their body. So the paper goes on to say, yep, most of the people that lose the weight, they gain it back. When we go to compare the two ways that they lose weight, they use a low energy, meaning low calorie, versus a ketogenic diet, low carbohydrate. And the the science is a little, or the article gets a little bit heavy here, where it dives into how do these two diets compare, and then they get a little discouraging about how unlikely it is that they're going to lose weight. And what the article circles back to look at is, if you've been on the ketogenic diet, if you've looked at, I'll just let you look at some of the graphs here. I don't know if most people will care, but they're looking at the weight loss, your BHB molecules, the hunger, and your ghrelin. But what they were doing with these is, for this first several weeks, they were on the low energy, and then they would refeed. So for anybody who's been on, so low energy diets mean low calorie, so 800 kilocalories is what those patients were on. And then when they would refeed, this hunger would spike. So I think it was the right in here, where they get that 5% weight loss, 10% weight loss, and then the refeeding here is where they gain back the weight. When they have this low energy, the hormones for hunger would rise. And they have some evidence over the last couple of years that when ketones are in circulation, those hunger hormones do not rise. It goes on to talk about the exogenous ketones and appetite. It gives some theories about why they thought that, but what I really want to get to is actually, I want to riff just a little bit. I'll bring the conclusion up, and we'll get to the conclusion here in a second. But I thought it was very interesting that one of the parts. So this is an animal study that they were one of the studies they were reviewing was an animal study where they took the ketones and they injected them subcutaneously. Now, I've had problems with cravings and had times where I had I wish I wouldn't have's. You get up after Thanksgiving Day and say, I just wish I wouldn't have had as many carbs as I did that yesterday. I'm swollen, my brain is slow. And in the end, I know I could have done better. I know I could have said no more. But when it comes to the appetite suppression for ketones, I'll take any effect I can get. To look at the way they studied this for some of the animal models is they took the ketones and they injected them into the subcutaneous fat. And all I could think of is, well, wouldn't that cause like necrosis of the fat? They're pretty acidic, these ketones are. I don't know. Nobody commented on whether or not it caused necrosis of the fat. But what it did do is the subcutaneous delivery of the ketones allowed the ketones to be present in their circulation, and that indeed did also suppress their appetite. So to summarize the paper and what I learned and what I would like you to take away is, for a couple of years, I have had several of the research people that I have communication with say, yes, we have evidence that the suppression of appetite is occurring with ketones in circulation. But it was this paper and this review that kind of went through what do we actually know from animal studies, and now they are trying to move them to human studies. What I found interesting is how complex the study, I talk about this chemistry shift and how we do need to have hormones on our side to suppress appetite. And in the study where they suppressed the calories to 800 calories or less, and they got the animal models to lose the 5% weight loss, and then they got to lose the 10% weight loss, and then you watch the surge of hormones like ghrelin, which stimulates the hunger, the cravings, and the want for food skyrocketed, which is where the cycle of many patients in clinic, not just animal studies, but say, yeah, doc, I went on your low-calorie diet. I did it for 6 months. I'm starving, and I really do want to eat all the time. That isn't just their ability to, that's not just in their head. The hormones do really go up when those low-calorie diets were consistent for weight loss. One of the places that we saw and this is where I want to point out this on here. So the ketogenic diet, that's KD, have the ability to induce significant weight loss while preventing the orexigenic, which means not anorexic, orexigenic, which is increasing the concentrations of ghrelin or hunger feelings. So it prevents that, which is otherwise seen in diets that induce weight loss or even induce a reduction in hunger feelings. And then they go on to say, yes, the mechanics through which the ketogenic diet does induce appetite suppression remain to be fully elucidated. And that's the part that's really frustrating to me, is I keep waiting for somebody to say exactly what's the science behind why this appetite is so suppressed. Because not only do we see this in the patients who, so if you go back into this, the part that they compared this to, you could find ketones in people with a low calorie diet, but they had to slam down that low calorie in a hurry. And especially in the people who reduced the calories, they were the ones to really have the surge of hunger afterwards. But during the time when the ketones were present, appetite suppression was very evident in several subjective studies. And of course, I think that's great. And in my clinic, I see that all the time. But I still want the exact science behind how that works. This review article just says I haven't missed one of the papers that says exactly how is this happening. But with my ear to the rail, I do think we have several people looking into the specifics of what really happens inside our bodies that suppresses the appetite. As I look at, let's go back to over here to the chat. As I look at some of the things where I say this to patients, and the first couple of years of doing the ketogenic diet, it was a little unsettling, because as a physician, when you hear things from a patient once, you're like, okay, that's you don't change behavior with that. But when you continue to hear things from a patient, a population that all says that their appetite was less, and I mean, I can feel it too, that when I can almost predict when my ketones are on the rise. I've been to the place where the ketones wouldn't rise, the insulin resistant was winning, my blood sugars wouldn't drop into the 75 range, they were up into the 90 range, and I was hungry. I was hungry a lot. And when it's almost like you could feel the suppression of appetite, and you could confirm it by pricking your finger and saying, oh wow, look, my ketones are up. And so the first time I had awareness that, yes, I can do that if I can get the ketones to go up. But I have patients that are severely insulin resistant. I can't get their sugars out of the 105 range, even on that 48-hour of fasting. So it's just very disheartening when you're helping this patient who isn't going to be satisfied with a 5% weight loss or a 10% of their weight loss. Yes, that's better, but I need them to lose close to 100 pounds to reverse some of those medical problems. And as you're trying to get them to not give up, to not have that surge of ghrelin, that surge of hunger, because you're pushing their calories down too low, and then the ketones are just trickling in. They're not really the appetite suppressing ketones. That is when adding those supplements, not subcutaneously, don't do that, drink them, do have evidence for showing the decrease in the surge of hunger. Today, one of the questions that came in from the Brains group was very insightful, that she has been trying to do keto for a while. She's having some brain things, and that's why she's in the course. And she's struggling with, I never see those blood sugars sink into that 70 range. Will they ever get there? And when you look at where she was on that keto continuum and how long it is between meals, there were several steps that I know would help it. And I think that's when patients show up to the clinic and I can give them this step-by-step. Here's this handout here. When I can give them a step-by-step that if you're in the section where you're eating 2 meals a day and your blood sugars are still that high, I'm going to push you to now put those 2 meals, let's see if I can turn this guy on, put those 2 meals within within that 16-8 time frame. And then we're going to have you work on a couple more skills, and then I'm going to move you down to a more advanced 16-8 where I take out some other of the crutches along the way. But eventually I'm going to have to push your body, push those mitochondria into a higher level of metabolism where we completely remove calories for a 36-hour period. And when I first start talking about that with somebody, or I can remember there was a lady in the group today where there were so many memories of my mother really pushing her metabolism. Again, my mom had cancer. She had some autoimmune disorders that were flaring. And I knew that the right thing for my mom was to get the ketones higher and the glucose lower. And she was able to step over the threshold and get to a 72-hour fast long before I ever figured it out. I was like, wow, Mom, you're doing great. And after about 4 months of really consistently getting a 72-hour, 48-hour fast she got good at, and then she got a 72-hour fast. And it'd been a few months since I saw her, and I'm like, you look younger. You look great, Mom. And as this woman was asking me a question, I could almost see the glow of my mother in that question, where she'd been around the sun a few times. I think she's north of 70 years old, and she hadn't gotten to a 36-hour fast. She hadn't stressed her metabolism to this level of 36 hours or more. I think she'd made it to 30 hours. But knowing that her medical problems are going to require the rise of ketones and the lowering of her glucose, and where this comes full circle is if you can't do that through fasting, and not that you can't do it, it's that the season you're in right now, that's too much to ask. You've got a season coming up. You can prepare for this. What I want you to do is still keep the ketones high, and that was something I didn't recommend early in my teaching of the ketogenic diet, and I wanted people to get there naturally. But what would happen is they would flounder in a place up here. They would stay at 2 meals a day. They would stay at the 16-8. Even if they got up to the advanced 16-8, which really just says, hey, get that fat out of your coffee. I don't tell them to get the fat out of the coffee before this. And then they have to go without some of the crutches that I've asked them to use before that. That advanced 16-8, if they go there too fast, if they're not ready in life to really take the next step, they fall. So, and then sometimes when they fall all the way back to the bottom. And of course, that's not helpful. So in this woman's case today, she has a husband who's also doing keto with her, and that 16-8 is as good as she can do. And at which point I said, now push yourself to a 36 or a 48-hour fast, stepping through these processes one at a time, conquering the skill before you move forward, and then really giving yourself the grace. If you don't do well on a 36-hour fast, well, don't advance to a 48-hour fast, but do fall back to a place where you're restricting your eating to that 8 hours only, and that the 16 hours include, and I pointed this out again today, no gum. That you have, if you want to chew gum, you got to put it in your 8 hours. And after 8 hours, on top of the other problems that we are trying to conquer, some of the coping skills people have to not eating is to chew on things, and chewing on gum, chewing on lozenges. And I've seen them just put one in after another. They go through a bottle of those Tic Tacs in 48 hours. I'm like, that's not fasting, especially for somebody who's insulin resistant. When they chew that gum, when they continue to put things into their mouth that stimulate the parotid glands to secrete enzymes, especially that insulin resistant patient will struggle with high blood sugars. They will not be able to get their blood sugars down into the 75 range and lower. So as I look at pushing their metabolism from 16-8 down to a 36-hour fast, and even if they can accomplish it once every other week for the first 4 or 5 fasts, and then try to get to once a week, what they're doing is they're pushing those ketones up, and they are continuing to empty out the stored glucose throughout their body that's been there for a while. And that reversal process is not fast. So instead of falling off the wagon, be sure to keep ketones in circulation. When all else fails over this holiday season, I will tell you that maybe this is a little too much information, but I will have ketones to drink when especially before I enter into a place of temptation, that I've learned if I do have alcohol, that you should put ketones in the drink with it. It's just better for me. I have less of a problem the next day. I think each season has less alcohol and less alcohol because, well, I like what it feels like to be in a state of ketosis, and the alcohol leads to other decisions like sneaking, having a carb here, saying yes to a craving that I normally would have said no to. And then it takes me longer to get back on the wagon unless I add ketones to when I'm struggling. So a couple of the other hacks that I do, I have a really fun video that's coming out, which several people have asked me what it is that I snack on. And honestly, I don't snack. That was another skill that's learned, but it's learned in that workflow of when you get to 2 meals a day, that's a new level of eating for most people. And then when they limit their eating to 8 hours a day, that's another skill level. And then when they get down to the advanced 8, they clean up that morning coffee and they still keep the food in those 8 hours. And then 8 hours turns into 6 hours, and then 6 hours turns into 4 hours. But you don't get there overnight. So when I look at snacking, I think of snacking as something that if I'm headed into a place where I know there's going to be a lot of temptations, and if I don't have ketones around, I will have some things that are really high in fat to give me that satiated feeling. I'll also make sure there's salt around. If not in my purse or pocket, the salt and the fat suppress my ghrelin, and I don't get as hungry, and I make better choices. All right, so let's hop over to your chats here, and I will quickly look at the questions that my team is doing for me. So here we go. All right, so good questions. December 14th, here we are. So again, putting those questions in to the chat there, and my team is taking care of it. Patrick just reminded me to say yes, give a thumbs up to our show. It really does help. One of the best things that I've been working on, trying to do a better job at YouTube over the last 6 months to 12 months, and they really care about you sharing videos is the most important thing, actually. Now I gotta go to the question. Here we go. And then I gotta do this guy. Good questions. There we go. All right. So these are some of the questions that came in. Oh, I love this question. So Karen was in the classroom before, and we were talking about brains being in craving and being addicted. And this was such a good question. I said, oh my goodness, will you come to my show tonight and put that on my questions? So many people could learn from this question. So I'll give a little more context to the question first. She's doing well. She's lost weight with keto. She's trying to improve a couple of, things that her brain's not doing perfectly, like getting 8 full hours of sleep without waking up. I mean, that's not always something you can will your brain to do, and we're gonna help her with that as best we can. But she said, I wonder, can you be addicted to ketones? Because as she does some shift work, when she goes from the night shift to the day shift, if she sips on ketones, she does pretty well and she feels good. But without supplementing with the ketones, without sipping on ketones as she's shifting the days and nights, she says, I feel exhausted. If I go one day without them, I'm very sleepy when I eat. So this is a brain thing, but it has nothing to do with ketones. It does tell me that she's insulin resistant and has been for a while. Her shift work isn't helping with that, and we're going to work on that, but I know she's insulin resistant because of what she said right there. When you have been someone who's trying to lose weight and has a brain that when you eat, you want to go to sleep, it is frequently because there is such an overproduction of the insulin relative to the food that you ate. Now, you don't get the feelings of hypoglycemia because she's keto adapted, and her ketones are keeping the floor of energy there so that she doesn't feel that that craving of hunger like she would have had she not been on a ketogenic diet. But what she will suffer from is it's like almost narcolepsy, not quite that extreme, but when the sugar rises, because she hasn't eaten and she's trying not to eat, when she does put food in, the sugar rises, and then the insulin rises after that, it will swell her brain. Those cells in her brain will swell just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit, but your brain doesn't care. Your brain is held in that cavity by a bone, by your skull. So there is no room for swelling. And years of insulin that's been high, when they use ketones, there is no swelling of the brain. So they get good energy, they get pretty good mental clarity and focus. But if she skips the ketones, she's stuck in that zone where, the example is very similar to the one she was struggling with. Let me show you here. So as Karen goes from a time where she's probably 16.8 is where she's at, her blood glucose is still in the 95 to 105 range. And she goes, but I haven't eaten. And when I do eat, I really get sleepy. When you look at what happens to keep that blood glucose so high, she hasn't eaten. She's in a fasted state, and her blood numbers, her blood glucose is not 75. It's pretty hardy. It's 95 to 105. And that is a reflection that her body hasn't emptied out all of this stored glucose that's been around. I think when I wrote the first book, I've gone back and reread it, and I see the mistake that I could have been a little clearer on, that I make it sound like that once you empty the liver from excessive amounts of glycogen or stored glucose, that you've arrived, you've made it, you're never going to go back there. But that's not the truth. You've emptied the glucose, and now you have this capacity to store glucose beyond what you need. So to reverse insulin resistance, it is time spent without delivering the glucose by mouth, but instead emptying the glucose from the liver. And after you've spent 6 months, or 3 to 6 months with a lowered glucose, your regular glucose lowers, and it will take time to get there. So when you're in a situation like Karen's in, and of course I have a whole bunch of hearty ideas that she could do to make all of her body healthy in a heartbeat, but she's in a season, she's like, well, I have a job and I still need to keep my job. How do I do this without falling all the way off the wagon between now and the time when I do have more space in my schedule, when I do have that improvement in my life structure, which is coming, but it's not here right now. And that is just keep the ketones in circulation. When she's doing that 36-hour fast and getting frustrated that I wake up in the morning, it's my fasting sugar, and it's still 95, it's still 102. What do I do about that? I'm like, well, continue to fast because you emptied your liver there. But in the setting of how does she still keep doing her job and really be able to suppress her appetite, it's if nothing else, supplement with ketones to keep the appetite low enough, and you will not need them forever, but you'll need them until you can really commit to doing some of the things that one of them is fasting longer and fasting more regularly. And I think she can do that. All right, so let's go back to some of the questions. It's a really good question, and you cannot get addicted to ketones. The other thing I didn't say in this one that I said earlier, the addiction to ketones, the reason you can't is because of how they enter into a cell. You can get addicted to glucose. It is, you will crave it, you will have withdrawal from it because there's a receptor involved. There's insulin that's that's in charge of carrying that glucose inside the cell. And you can fatigue it and you can wear it out, and then you can upregulate those receptors. And all of those are the mechanics behind what it takes to be addicted to a substance. So when we look at addiction through other stimulus of dopamine, so cocaine and alcohol and marijuana, you're upregulating a receptor. And when those receptors get used to the dose you're at, then your body makes more. And now you will need more of the drug to feel that same euphoria. That's a similar process of what's happening when the glucose is high. The receptors that listen to insulin will now be upregulated, and then you'll have more, and then you'll have more. And that's what insulin resistance is. It's like an addiction to the sugar. So to undo it, you can't undo it for a day. You must undo it long enough for those receptors to downregulate, and your body's fuel in the meantime can be ketones. You don't have a fatigability or the receptors in a ketone. You don't need that to get that inside the cell. And it's for that reason that I can with confidence say, no, ketones are not addicting, but sugar is. And when you detox from it, it's not the white knuckle, I got off glucose, I cut my carbs to 20, I'm all better. It's the journey. And just like when we're trying to train folks on how to not use sex, drugs, rock and roll to cope with the stress of life, Karen's going to have struggles. And what I'm saying is you won't need the crutch forever. But staying the course is about keeping that fuel available so your brain doesn't do that brain fart into craving things when you don't want it to, that you don't get in front of temptation and say, shoot, oh, heck, what's one drink? And so says every alcoholic that relapses. One drink leads to 2. One bite of chips leads to 3. One cupcake leads to the next one. And it is in those relapses that the receptors don't get to downregulate. Now we got to start over for this backwards approach to resetting Karen's body to not be insulin resistant. And it is possible. It just takes time. And in the time, we don't want you to be without a state of ketosis, which means ketones in circulation. Getting there through fasting, perfectly. Getting there through eating better, perfectly. The insulin resistant patient doesn't have it that easy. They have to keep advancing their metabolism. That does not always fit into their life at the moment that they should step it up. Okay, let's go back to our questions. Here we go. All right, so first of all, thank you for showing up and asking that question on the live. I really appreciate you. All right, let's go through the next one. I love this question too. I was looking at this earlier. What threw me off at Thanksgiving was my son-in-law made me gluten-free food. First of all, your daughter needs to keep that guy. A son-in-law that makes gluten-free food for his mother-in-law, I would have a tough time saying no to him too, because that takes a lot of effort to figure out gluten-free and then to do it for your mother-in-law for Thanksgiving. So, one of the honest answers here is how do you say no without hurting their feelings? It is a skill set. One of the things we would practice in when I was doing my recovery teams, and if I would run a group, we would role play saying, well, when somebody offers you a drink, what is it that you say to say no, thank you? Because most alcoholics don't have that skill when they first start out either. They get offered alcohol and they don't have a place for saying no. They're like, And many times when food is such a place of love, like I have an Italian on my team and she's like, we use the love language of food. So what happens when food is your love language? And I'm like, that's real. Learning how to say no to somebody you love is more about focusing on the relationship and not the food. What I would recommend is for you to praise his efforts, just like I did there. Like, you had to work so hard at that. That is so kind of you to take the time to research it, to look into this. Thank you. And then say, I'm going to say no, and I hope you can respect that. It has nothing to do with your cooking. It has everything to do with, I'm really struggling, and I know if I take one bite, I'm going to struggle today. So please do not read this wrong. Your act of kindness is something I genuinely appreciate. It's that I'm just not strong enough to take one bite and not eat the whole thing. And I think showing that vulnerability is really where you gain his true love and affection, that you do appreciate what he did. That's why it was hard for you to say no. The question is not a minor one. It is a skill set, and it is something that, as I would demonstrate this to the people in the recovery groups, they were like, I've never seen that. I've never seen that done. So you have mirror neurons were firing all over the place. Okay, let's go to the next question. Those are good questions. All right, Holly writes in and says, what are your thoughts on desserts with sugar substitutes? Again, the most dangerous for this, for the people to have sugar substitutes is people who are addicted to the sweetness. And she asks, should we just avoid sweets altogether? Well, that would be ideal. And it is because I'm going to compare this to an alcoholic because it is such a parallel path. When we take a newly recovering alcoholic, we tell them, you know what, the hardest part is you're going to trigger the want for your love, which is alcohol, with just the smell and the taste and the thoughts of it. When you swallow it, it gets even harder. So when we put sugar substitutes into the menus of many people that are, on their way to losing weight, they come with baggage, meaning the baggage is insulin resistance. So by triggering that height of insulin and by the craving, and then the response afterwards, which is often they're chasing their tail, trying to say no to the next bite, and they spiral the drain, they fall off the wagon. And in the end, the best things don't happen. So what I tend to do with the sugar substitutes is I think they are just rotten on the gut lining. The mucosa or the slime layer, and I write about this in my book, it's kind of gross, but the slime layer for your gut is really important for filtering what belongs in there and what doesn't belong in there, meaning what belongs in our body and what doesn't belong in our body. So as it is helping to keep foreign objects in the gut lumen, where the food and eventually the stool comes together, that slime layer is a critical part of the sorting tools to allowing in what we need and keeping out what we don't. And those sugar substitutes just are, especially for anybody who's had gut troubles. If you do a colonoscopy for somebody who uses the sugar substitutes to clean themselves out because they aren't absorbed, and they're very good at causing a bowel cleanse. And then you do a colonoscopy and you try to look at the slime layer is all gone. And often if they've got a fragile gut mucosa, there's ulcers within a couple of, within a 24-hour period of taking in some of those sugar substitutes. And you only have to hear the rumbles as you eat them to say, this doesn't settle well in my gut. So I tell them no. The next question actually does a pretty good job of tying together another part to that answer. So let's go to this. So Stephanie says, I decided to bake and decorate goodies with my family this year, and so far, so good. Haven't eaten or licked a finger. You are like playing with fire. Good job, first of all. But it's kind of like sending a recovering alcoholic to work at the bar. So the beauty of what I like to do is that to remember. I think there's one more question here that I was going to tie it together. Let me read Jennifer's because I'll give it to both of these because you are playing with fire. But honestly, there's also some part of I had my team come together for a creative process and trying to plan out how to set up the next year. And I think it was really great to see how well we all stayed keto, but also as one of the ladies was still fasting on the first night of being there, kind of finishing up her fast, and to watch how well it was for her to say no until she said yes, which was the next morning. She has been practicing saying no before. That's not the first time she's done that. So Stephanie, as you look at putting yourself in close proximity to all those temptations, I would I'd say good job. You clearly aren't doing this for the first time. And as you test yourself, that's how I file it. When I look at my temptations now, I say this is a test of my strength. And if I can frame that before I walk into the bake sale or the parents' volunteer things at school, if I can frame it in a way that says, I am setting up myself for a test. There is something much more measurable that I will put the parameters for what is success on and what is not success. I think you're really wise to not have even licked a finger, and you're way stronger than I'd be. Let's go to Jennifer's. If we attempt to bake goodies for holidays, which sweeteners are best? I know she has a sweetener video, but I think it's an important topic to cover. There's several new sweeteners on the market. You know, the monk fruit is a very good one, and the allulose are the ones that I think still have the best profiles for taste and for not being quite so gut-wrenching. But I will also tell you that my husband is allergic to all of them. So it makes this other part of what we do at my house a different battle, which is, I mean, he's so allergic that I would know if something has stevia in it because he gets mouth ulcers. The lining inside his mouth, he'll get little ulcers. And so if he doesn't read the fine print on a label and he swallows something that has a sweetener in it, yeah, it's a great litmus test for canary in the cave that there's sweeteners in that. So what we've learned to do is say it's not a terrible thing when you're solidly in the keto chemistry. And by that, I mean, our family's been keto for a while. I practice these skill sets, even though this week is not my best week to flaunt that I didn't do a very long fast this week. Each week I'm practicing fasting. I'm practicing saying no. And I've been doing this for several years, 4 years or so. And the longer I am able to flex those skills, the more confident I am that I can get through a temptation. I also know that limiting the access to the sugar, but then having real sugar around during the times where we do eat sugar at my family. And I say that because my kids aren't insulin resistant. They're lean and healthy. My husband's allergic to it. And so I would be making it just for me. And I have learned that restricting the amount in the house is a way better plan for me. And then knowing that I frame it as a test that, yep, there's going to be sweets in the house. I know that I will allow myself, two of them for the season or something. And then frame it to say, take joy when I do it. Like the dopamine still surges and it still tastes very good to me. And then just enjoy the moment. One of my favorite sayings has been that when I would tell them to restrict carbs long before I was telling them to go keto. And they're like, well, can't I ever have that? Because I would tell them to get rid of fruit too. They would just overeat the fruit. And I'd say you can have it once a year on your birthday. Not everybody else's birthday. On your birthday, you can have it. And it's the same concept where limit the time of temptation. Have what it is that you love. Denying you from the things that you really do love forever is not a wise idea in anybody's rule book. But when you're sick, like the gal that wrote in and says, my sugars are still high. It's not okay for her to have those sweets ever yet, actually. And the stevia is the most accessible. It also is the least likely to stimulate the insulin. The monk fruit and the allulose appear to be the two of my top favorites because of a much better flavor of sweetness when you put those together. But less is better. And if you're not healthy, it's like saying, it's okay, alcoholic. You can have some of that. You can have one sip. He's not healthy enough for that. He or she will result in the one drink leads to the next drink, leads to the next drink. So the right answer is less is more, 0 is best. And it isn't until you are metabolically healthy and your skill set for saying no and restrictions is mature, is able to say, I can do this. I'm not a reflexive 12-year-old anymore. I'm an adult, and I've been practicing these skills, and the sweetness will be around me, and I can try to manage that. That's probably not the answer you wanted to hear. I just love answering these questions. Let's do a couple more of them. Let's see. Go to here. Okay. Yeah. Similar thing to what Wanda says here. My whole problem is watching everybody else eating what they want. I do fine if I'm alone. But the gatherings are tough. They do not push me to eat. It's just me. And I just think of that as this mental skill set that that ability to calm yourself and not be jealous, not want what another person has, but really be at peace with what's going on in your mind, in your body, and your heart, instead of the envy that is just easy for all of us to have. Wanda, we all have this. But the more mature you get in this process, it really is impressive how well the confidence of being in that moment, and really loving on them, looking at them having the joy of having food and not doing it with spite or with jealousy, but to truly just say, I'm here for the person. I'm here pouring into somebody that I only get to see a few times a year. And with that, that human connection is far more valuable than the calories or the dopamine from that one bite of good food. So when I've struggled with coaching people through this, it is really getting them to shift away from the food and to focus on the person. And when you can practice loving them, practice being in relationship with them, learning about them, hearing their stories, being a true part of their life, it's easy to not hop into that bandwagon of, oh, I wish I could have what they have, because you're not alone. This is a very common problem, and it's a vulnerable statement saying, they don't do it to me, I'm doing it to myself. That's true. That's true with all of us. So somebody, there's a couple more that are so good. Okay, I'll do one more and then we'll quit. Here we go. So Joan says, officially and formally diagnosed with ADHD at 79 years old. I added a therapist and a psychiatrist to my list of doctors and dentists. Poor thing. She's on this really small dose of Ritalin, 2.5 to 5. Is it safe to fast? Yes, it is safe to fast on those medications. So, okay, I lied one more time. Dr. Boz, how does your approach change when working with a long-term ketoer? So that would be somebody like me. I've been keto for 3.5 years. My weight loss has slowed dramatically despite keeping my macros locked in and consistent. That is a trap. Okay, I'm totally gonna use this as a teachable moment. It's a great question. Might have to start out with that one next week. Okay, so what I like to point out when people come to me saying, Doc, I didn't stall, but now I've stalled. I had a couple of support groups that I was able to catch up with this past week, and they were asking me questions of advanced ketoers, saying, but Doc, that morning glucose is still elevated. And I said, well, where are you on this keto continuum? So the keto continuum, let me just show you the 12 really quick, saying starts out at, every 2 to 4 hours, then get your carbs down to less, then 2 meals a day, then 16/8, then advanced 16/8. Then you do not go from 6 to 7 overnight. You take it from 8 hours of eating to 6 hours of eating to 4 hours of eating, 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour eating. So 20 fat or 23 and 1 or OMAD is that doesn't happen overnight. And then there's the stressing of the metabolisms. So I asked the patient, and I would ask this person, where do they hang out? And he said, I don't use the keto continuum. I'm like, everybody uses the keto continuum. You just don't know that you're doing it. This is the process of saying you have taken your metabolism to a place where it is stable. And every human body, everybody has will seek for an equilibrium, will seek for not wasteful of energy. So if you are not at your ideal body weight and you're saying, but Doc, my macros are correct. Okay, the only thing I would be worried about is you are still keeping your carbohydrates less than 20. When people are stuck on macros, they start counting protein and they start looking at, is it enough protein to keep? And I'm like, okay, that only matters, that formula is not stamped in stone anywhere, because the more insulin resistant you are, the more sensitive to that you become. And it is in this place of advanced keto people, like this gal that wrote in, that I want them using blood ketone strips, that they can get away with urine ketone strips before that. That's where the yellow is. But as you move into these advanced levels, I want you looking at your chemistry And if you're saying, but my weight loss has stalled, I'm 3.5 years into this, my macros are great. Well, your macros, that macros section worked for the last metabolism. But as you hang out at this baseline metabolism, which again, you can live here. This is where people live. And it isn't, they do it for a week. You're living there. You're living somewhere there, whether it's 16-8, advanced 16-8, or restricted hours of eating. That's maybe not all the way to 23-1, but these are hard to do. So if you can say, well, I can get to 16-8, but I'm stalled. Now what do? I want to know that your ketones in the morning that your Dr. Boz ratio in the morning when you wake up is at least an 80 or less. That's where weight loss happens. But 40 or less if you're trying to improve an autoimmune disorder. And you say, but doc, my glucose is so high, I can't get there. That's what happened with several of these people in the support group in the past week. I'm like, well, then you need to stress your metabolism. And the stress of metabolism is stepping over a threshold and saying, how often do you do a 36-hour fast? And I mean a fast, not a kind of fast. This is fast for 36 hours. That's no calories, no sweeteners. You start in the evening, 2 cycles of sleep, so that you have 8 plus 8, 16 hours of sleep, and that leaves you only 1 day of real fasting, 20 hours of fasting. You do drop blood pressure really quickly, and blood sugar does lower very quickly, but it's not without, those are real situations that when the fasting happens, they really do see the weight start to come off. Your body over 3.5 years has reset to an equilibrium that is stable, but is not going to lose you any weight unless you stress the metabolism. I think these keto continuum number 7, where you get it down to 23-1, it's very hard. I mean, I can do it now, but I also no longer have 3 kids I'm trying to get food for. I have 1. And so getting my eating down to a 1 hour when I do eat, I can screw it up in a heartbeat. I can take, food when I get home, and instead of just eating my sardines while here at the office. So a 4-hour window is a lot easier in my life, and it doesn't push me to a place where I wasn't strong enough emotionally to stay at that place. But when that was the case, if I wanted further weight loss, if I wanted further autophagy, you got to stress your metabolism, and you don't do this all the time. You use this intermittently, and you use it frequently enough to get you to the level that gets you your intended outcome. So I share that because so many of the folks that write in have this exact same problem. And if you are using that Keto Continuum workbook, let's see if I have that. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. This little thing is the steps that I just went through right there. This side is the magnet that just shows you what food to eat. And about the time they figure out what food to eat, then I say, now flip it over, and that's the Keto Continuum. So this will last you until you get the weight off. And again, the use intermittently is when people really do struggle. They've been on keto, they've really emotionally matured on how to say no to food. They're in a stable pace, but they are not at their body's health outcomes, and that really is the key to getting not just them a better outcome for a better outcome for how their weight comes off, but for their true metabolism to be strengthened, so that right up till the day before the funeral, your brain is working, your body is working, and you have a strong spirit to share with the world. All right, so if you're watching this on the replay, I will put on the end screen here, there's a great video that kind of couples with some of the stuff that I've been talking about, which is, when does ketosis actually start? And that is answered in a video that we'll clip to the end of this. I'm going to check my numbers, actually. And I'll probably have to say all that again. But I didn't drink all of my ketones. It is something that I am very, I don't check my numbers before and after the show or beginning and end of the show because it's fun. I do it to show you. I have to check my numbers too. As much as I can feel ketones, you can't trust yourself by feeling ketones all the time. You should use evidence. So I do that, and I do it in front of you. I also think that it can be hard for me to say no after the show's over to eating. And if I have ketones in circulation, I do a lot better at resisting. My appetite is suppressed. All right, ketones are counting down to 1.2, so about the same as they were at the beginning, but a little bit higher. And my glucose is a few points higher. So what that shows you is essentially stable, but if you had any idea how much stress I do feel when I do this show, you'd say, good job. So again, if you're looking for a great addition to this lesson, check out this video that shows you when does ketosis start, and that will wrap up a full night of ketones. We'll see you next week, and if you don't check in next week, I will wish you a very happy holidays and Merry Christmas. Until then, we're signing off with the Dr. Boz Show, reversing those medical problems one ketone at a time. We'll see you